Hey guys, it's Liv here, bringing you guys a brand new series on the channel. We're going to be discussing the viability of the Gen 4 OU Pokemon and how that is going to change in Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. Today we're going to be starting off with Gliscor. I actually ran a Twitter poll with options for Gliscor, Heatran, and Clefable, and then I left an other option as well, which a couple people actually mentioned Garchomp. I'm kind of shocked that the only people who mentioned any comments for other all mentioned the same Pokemon, but Garchomp was like a really close option there for sure. But over half the people actually voted Gliscor, so it seems like a lot of people do think this will be the best Pokemon, and for good reason. There's a lot that's going to be buffed to Gliscor, but first, before we get into that, if you enjoy the video, make sure you remember to leave a like, subscribe if you want to see more. The next episode, we're going to be covering either Clefable or Heatran. I've already made the thumbnails for those, so next will be Heatran or Clefable, followed by the other one next week. And then we're going to be starting next week on Thursday, viewer suggestions. I'll leave a like goal. If we get 25 likes, on Saturday, I'll do the third one, and I'll make it 3 videos this week for the series. So that's your like goal, 25 likes on either this or Thursday's episode, and you'll get a third. So with that said, let's first break down Gliscor and its position in the Diamond and Pearl OU metagame. So if we look at the viability rankings for Gen 4 OU, we can see that Gliscor was an A-rank Pokemon. You know, that's a pretty impressive rank for sure. It's held by the likes of Pokemon such as Metagross, Zapdos, Gengar, Flygon, a lot of really common Pokemon in this format. So that's nothing to say anything at Gliscor, you know, not being as good just because it did lack a few things that it has now, which I'll get into those in a bit because they do definitely show in its sets. It's definitely, in terms of premier ground types, it's no Swampert, but it seems to be like up there as like the next best one, which for good reason. Again, Gliscor is still a phenomenal Pokemon. It still has a lot going for it. As we can see, Taunt, Ice Fang, Earthquake, and Roost, these were pretty common in a lot of different Gliscor sets I saw. While they changed in EV spreads on the team archive I had with hundreds of Diamond and Pearl teams, these were pretty common moves to run on Gliscor in Gen 4. With a few different variations for things like Knockoff, for example, or Stealth Rock, but these are the common 4 moves, with just max speed. I'm assuming just for other Gliscors, that's why it has Ice Fang, and then max HP just for generic bulk. It didn't really need anything specific on it, just a general Gliscor spread. We see another spread with Swords Dance, which is just replaced by Taunt, and this is just a more offensive build for Gliscor. Again, just trying to tie with other Gliscors. That's really what you want to aim for in Gliscor. You're still able to outpace a lot of other common OU threats, things like Heatran, for example. So still very, very good for Gliscor, of course. This is another set that I found with Knockoff. It was a bit more on the defensive end, less so on the going for max speed, but this obviously is not going to be running Ice Fang, so it just needs to creep Heatran with this, which is, I'm assuming, why it has 280 speed, because that would be creeping, it would actually be creeping 279, so I think they actually fucked up the speed of it, because you only need 279 on this for Heatran, but to each their own. Regardless though, it's definitely more of a Phys-Def Gliscor, probably just meant to take on physical Pokemon in the metagame. If I had to look at the metagame, this would probably be Pokemon such as Tyranitar, of course. Breloom would obviously be correct by this, though you're not really doing too much back to Breloom, to be fair, but it's probably mostly able to outpace things like T-Tar and Heatran, of course, with the Phys-Def maybe helping with things like Infernape as well. Probably non-Ice Punch Metagross as well, which I saw a bunch of Ice Punch Metagrosses, so I'm not sure if that's really what this would have been used for, but at the very least though, it was probably useful for any physical Infernapes for sure, same as Tyranitars that didn't have ice moves, etc. So I like the Taunt with Knockoff variation, of course. Knockoff just very nice to get rid of items, so sadly this is the shittier Knockoff, which is something of course that Gliscor will be getting buffed in this generation, having access to the high base power Knockoff, so it's already something that we can cover that will be very different for Gliscor. Next up, our final set for Gliscor was a Stealth Rock variant that I found with Stealth Rock, Roost, Ice Fang, and Earthquake. For these last 2 variations, I had to dig a lot to actually find other sets, because unlike Clefable and Heatran, Gliscor didn't really have a lot of set variety, at least in terms of Smogon variations. It was really just the first 2 sets. But I found a lot of sets that had Stealth Rocks or that had Knockoff over Ice Fang, so it really just depended on, of course, where you looked. This set seems to be creeping any sort of Pokemon that would hit 308, so my guess is this is creeping anything like the Rotoms, for example, because I believe Rotoms peaked at 91, like regular Rotom peaked at 91, but I don't know what you'd be doing to that. So my guess is that this was creeping anything that was creeping base 90 Pokemon. So in that case, I mean, that's totally fair. There's a fair bit of base 90 Pokemon if we look, for example, at the DPP OU speed tiers. We can see base 90 Pokemon that reach there in the format. Actually, there's not really a lot in OU. I mean, there's Roserade and Lucario, so this is probably a Lucario check, to be honest. At least for the specific team it was on. This would still obviously creep the Rotom forms, but again, you're not really touching those outside of Knockoff, which doesn't even have So the Gliscor sets in general don't really seem too varied in what they're doing, but they do seem solid nonetheless. Now we're going to get into what makes Gliscor phenomenal in this upcoming format. For one, Gliscor now has Poison Heal, which already buffs the Swords Dance sets tremendously. For one, we can see that we can ditch Ice Fang for Facade, which is just a much more spammable option. Between Facade and Earthquake, you're going to be hitting a wide variety of Pokemon in this format, because really the only Pokemon that are going to switch in on this sort of coverage would be things like a Bronzong, for example, with Levitate, or just on any other floating Steel types, or just floating normal resists. That would be the only way you would really actually wall this sort of set. And again, you could always change Facade out for something like an Ice Fang and Knockoff, potentially Dual Wing Beat if that is added to Gliscor's move pool. I know that was something that was leaked at home. I was going to make a Dual Wing Beat Earthquake set, however, I didn't want to throw on Dual Wing Beat in hopes that while it could definitely come to Gliscor, I didn't want to false advertise in this video. So even just Earthquake and Facade is just a generically speaking really spammable option, even if we just take into account the Diamond and Pearl Platinum metagame as it was. Let alone if we only go off of regional decks, it only gets even stronger because you don't have to face Pokemon such as Jirachi, for example. So that does definitely help Gliscor's case here. I think that realistically, this will probably be a very fast set, just similar to the fast max attack, max speed variation with Jolly. However, I can totally see a more bulky set with Swords Dance going around. I know that the sets originally for Swords Dance Gliscor in past generations were more on the bulky end. So we'll have to see what happens there. But Poison Heal should definitely be a huge buff for this Pokemon. Another thing as well that really helps Poison Heal variations is no Hidden Power Ice. This will hurt a lot of Pokemon such as Infernape, for example, that would run a special set with Hidden Power Ice to maybe get around this. Or really just any other Pokemon that would be on the more offensive end with Hidden Power Ice. These would be Pokemon like maybe Heatran, for example, with an Air Balloon that could definitely be a check to this. No longer can because it doesn't have Hidden Power Ice. Roserade with Technician, for example, which it did get as a hidden ability now, no longer has Hidden Power Ice. Rotom forms that aren't Frost or Wash can no longer run Hidden Power Ice for this Pokemon. So definitely a fair bit of Pokemon that can no longer run Hidden Power Ice for Gliscor, which only helps in its viability. To put it in perspective, this will probably be taking the Land of Tea role in this format, assuming that Land of Tea does not come back, which for good reason. Again, the fact that Land of Tea will most likely not be in these games unless they do the merge decks of Sword and Shield and BDSP. So this just having the same typing, and it has a lot of the same moves as well. You could basically pivot this to really any sort of old Land of Tea spread, and it'll probably do a lot of work. Next up, we have a Stealth Rock set with Stealth Rock, Earthquake, Toxic, and Roost. This is just a standard Stealth Rock set for Gliscor. Really, this is all you kind of need for any sort of lead set, because you could just Toxic any sort of Pokemon that might lead off. Things like Swamperts, for example, or even just, you could use it to Toxic Hippo. You could use it to Toxic any sort of Lotties. Really just anything that would want to switch it on an Earthquake, as long as it's not, again, like a Bronzong, which will probably just be the best check to this sort of set. We have Stealth Rock, of course, just as a lead. Luckily as well, you don't need to just lead off with your dedicated lead, because there will most likely be Team Preview in this remake. So that'll again help Gliscor's case significantly. If there's not Team Preview again in this format, then that'll definitely change, I guess, how this set is played, but you could still definitely make it work for sure. Next up, we have the final new Gliscor before we get into the new Land of Teas, as I put it. With Substitute, Toxic, Protect, and Earthquake. This is a set you can definitely pull off pretty easily, because you have Protect and Sub to actually just stall out teams pretty effortlessly. It's just a basically better version of Sub Protect Suicune, because the fact that, one, Earthquake is so much more of a damaging offensive option than, let's say, a Scald is. While there are obviously types that are immune, really, again, the only Pokemon that would truly hard wall this would be something like a Gliscor or Skarmory. Then you have, obviously, Sub-Toxic to just get around stuff, and then Protect to whittle through Toxic turns until they're just in Earthquake range. Basically, just needs to be a floating Steel type to really actually truly wall this. So, in general, this Pokemon will just, defensively speaking, be a nightmare for teams to handle. Now we're going to get into the new Land of Teas. We have two of them in this set. First up, we have Stealth Rock, Earthquake, U-Turn, and Roost. This is basically, to put into perspective, just quite literally going to function like a Rock Land of Tea, except for it's going to have Roost on it. With U-Turn, this is able to get momentum on teams pretty easily. The speed tier is also really good because it will actually just outpace things in that base 90 mark, which Land of Tea, while it can do base 90, there's a lot of Pokemon that can tie it or outpace it that hit the 91, 92 range, where this can at least tie other Gliscors, for example, if you wanted to, let's say, ditch something for Ice Fang, if you felt like that was your best case, which you could, to be fair, ditch Roost for it if you wanted to go with 3 attacks. And that would definitely hurt other Gliscor leads that would maybe want to lead against you. Also, just the momentum this will gain into other breakers, or even just other Pokemon. For example, if you, let's say, wanted to switch into an Ice Resist like Heatran, you could just U-turn, and against most Pokemon you'll be able to U-turn on. Really just stuff like Weavile that will actually pose a threat, or like a Lottie, for example, that could carry Ice Beam for this. But in general, this could definitely be a pretty damaging set in the metagame for sure. realistically, just U-turn and rocks alone will be very reliable, especially against any sort of defog Gliscors, which I don't think I actually put a defog Gliscor on here, but defog Gliscor could definitely also be pretty good. You could easily honestly just ditch rocks on this set for defog, and that would honestly serve the same purpose. I should have probably put a specific defog set, to be fair, but again, you realistically just need to ditch like rocks for defog. It just serves the same role. Regardless though, the utility-based Gliscor will just function as any sort of utility-based lander team would. Instead of just throwing on a Rocky Helmet, you would just throw on Toxic Orb, because it, objectively speaking, will just keep Gliscor a lot healthier and able to defensively check things a lot more reliably because of it. Finally, we have the Dual Dance Gliscor. Now, I thought this could also be a pretty cool set. Dual Dance Lando obviously runs Stone Edge over Facade. However, I felt like Facade and Earthquake were just more spammable on Gliscor, especially because it's going to hit harder than Stone Edge would, and you don't have to risk accuracy with this. So I thought that this in general would just be the option that Dual Dance would go with. I thought this as well. Again, really, it's only being checked by Bronzong and Skarmory, which Skarmory could definitely whirlwind it out. However, you could probably muscle past Bronzong, because this is just a more defensive Pokemon. You could just invest to probably take a Bronzong hit with this, for example, and then Sword Sense up, and then go for Facade spam, because you can Sword Sense on the switch into Bronzong, for example. And then at +2, I would assume that Gliscor, even with just a low attack set, would be able to at least 2-hit KO Fizz Def Bronzong, but we'll have to see. I'm pulling up the calcs right now. So with the max attack Gliscor, if you were to set up on Bronzong, for example, Gyro Ball's gonna basically do around 20 to 24%. It's gonna do, even from a Brave set, it's gonna do around 26.7% max to just 244 HP. So if you were to go with a relaxed Bronzong without any attack, you're basically getting back almost every bit of damage it's going to do to you, because it's only going to do 16 to 19%. You're recovering 12% each turn, so you're going to be getting back almost all that. You can set up to +6 pretty easily on Bronzong and just Facade spam it, even if it is Fizz Def. So you could actually, with this sort of set, 1v1 Bronzong, which should be fair. I guess you could have on any other SD set. However, the difference being is that this just, offensively speaking, could be a lot more of a sweeper through a team. While you do have Roost, obviously, on the other SD variations, this could also set up a Rock Polish, and then now faster Pokemon can't come in on it. Really, the best check to this would be a Skarmory that could just whirlwind it out. Otherwise, it's just going to be a really offensive nightmare for a lot of teams to handle. You could definitely ditch Rock Polish as well for Fire Fang, which would help significantly with your Skarmory matchup, which, again, that's really the only Pokemon you need to worry about checking with this, offensively speaking. Facade still does a lot, to be fair, but you're never going to get this thing to +6 to do that sort of damage. However, with +2 alone, versus just a Fizz Def Skarmory, you're going to do around 38 to 46, which if you were to flinch or get a burn, that's basically completely screwing over Skarmory, because while you could obviously get a second hit off on it, and it could just whirlwind you out right there with the +2, at the same time though, it does need to worry about whatever Pokemon will come in next, and that could definitely screw it over as a switch-in for later on. So Gliscor with Fire Fang could easily just run this over the Rock Polish and just go for, again, the more offensive set. So in general, I think this could definitely take the role of Lander T, and honestly, because of the fact there's no Hidden Power Ice, I totally see this surpassing Lander T in the format, even if it was allowed. So we'll have to see what happens here. I do think that Gliscor will basically just be the new Lander Steer in this format, but let me know what you guys think down below. And if you enjoy this sort of video, leave a like below. Let me know what your guys' thoughts were. As I said, this is a pilot episode, so I'd love to hear any suggestions that you guys might have. And with that said, it's been Liv, and I will see you guys in the next one. Until then, peace out, guys.